It's so long ago now, I've almost forgotten exactly what I felt. So many things have happened in between, but shock was possibly the first thing. I never expected it was going to happen. Upset, disappointment, and to a certain extent anger that we should find ourselves in this situation. I think, obviously, I have the stories where I've had sort of fights with people over the internet and so forth, debating it. But for me, in trying to understand what's really going on with Brexit, I think my own personal journey in terms of understanding who I am and what I identify with is possibly interesting. Because when I first left this country to go and live somewhere else, I was 19, and if you'd asked me then, I would have said I was English. Absolutely, I'd been brought up as English, not British, and that's the way I felt. Probably by the time I went to go and live in Japan, which is where I spent a lot of my working life, I would have said I was British. I probably upgraded to that extent. But I very much did not feel European, and it was only ironically living in Japan that made me feel more European, because I was meeting a lot of other people from Europe, different countries, Spain, France, Germany and so forth, and we often used to speak together in Japanese because that was a common language, and I began to feel then that I was actually European as opposed to British, because there was clearly a common culture that was shared that was not shared with the Japanese. However, as my Japanese got better and as I became a sort of a functioning adult, as it were, in Japanese society, I then once again realized that that in itself was something that was a limitation, and that by virtue of the fact that I was now able to function in Japanese society, I realized that what I was doing was communicating at a human level, and that was really my identity, was being a human. Now, that's not a journey that everybody is lucky enough to be able to make, but that doesn't mean that that's not something that we are all, by virtue of the fact that we speak at all, that we have language and have culture, that we can not take a step along that route. And that is historically what we have done. We used to live in tiny little tribes and villages that were fighting with each other. And then slowly that expands, and slowly it expands, and slowly it expands. This is the path through history. We're now at another juncture where we're really looking at becoming a global species. And there's a resistance to that. And that's what's happening with Brexit, I think. It's just a break point in that journey. And hopefully it won't take us back too far, and we'll move on. But that's my personal input. I don't think I see the UK differently particularly. I think if anything, it's just confirmed what I already knew, which is that we are a nation that is split, really. Has it changed our place in the world? It will do. If we go ahead with this thing, it most definitely will change our place in the world, and not for the good. I can't see any upside to it. I understand that we can do all these trade deals and thereby perhaps regain some of our former glory in some people's imagination, but it's not going to happen, because the world is a very different place. We need to be cooperating, we need to be working towards a greater unity, not fragmenting. And one of the ironic results of Brexit will be that the unity of the United Kingdom will break up, absolutely certainly. Scotland will go, Northern Ireland will probably be absorbed into Ireland, so we'll be left with Little England and Wales tacked on, which is not a good look, frankly. That's not going to work for us. Has it changed the way I think about the UK? No, except more disappointed than I was previously. I just wish we weren't this stupid, but we are. We're human. I don't think it's affected my professional life because most other things I'm not really working as much as I used to. I'm writing, and those things do not affect me on a professional level. However, it's going to affect people around me. It's going to affect my children. It's going to affect their ability to move easily and to be part of a greater cultural union, and that's the thing that really concerns me more, is to what extent it's going to isolate this country. Again, personally, I'm lucky enough that I can, I have work and contacts and interests outside of Europe as well, so those things will not perhaps be affected. But in terms of the way Britain is perceived in the world, I mean, I think we're already a laughing stock for everything that's gone on around us, but those less immediately obvious economic effects will be profound, I think. And the thing that upsets me most is the fact that we are no longer part of a project, an experiment, if you like, which is what the EU represents, that needs to be done. I mean, it's not that it's just something that is a personal hobby on behalf of the Germans and the French to dominate the world. This is something that needs to happen, not just in Europe, but actually across the whole world. And if Europe can't get it right, then there's no hope for the rest of us, frankly. We need to be moving in that direction, so, yeah. Well, the Irish border was never mentioned at all at the beginning because nobody had thought about it. I don't think, even the Remainers hadn't really thought about it as an issue, but it turns out to be, of course, the key point, because we're going to have a land border with the EU, and what do you do about it? And everybody says, oh, don't worry, there'll be some sort of technological solution, which there may be, to goods and so forth. But I thought that the whole point of Brexit was about controlling our borders, and not with respect to goods, but with respect to people. Now, what never seems to be mentioned, at least to my knowledge, it's never taken up in the press, is what do you do if you have no border on Northern Ireland and people decide to walk across the border? I mean, there's nothing. You can fly from Holland to Dublin for, £35, and then you just walk across the border and you're in the UK. That's not controlling the border. You cannot have Brexit in the sense that everybody wanted it and not have a hard border across Northern Ireland. Well, I mean, most Brexiteers probably don't care about that. They just think, well, they'll sort themselves out. But it is a huge problem. And I don't understand why people are never mentioned as part of the equation. You can't control people without a hard border. I actually have a world passport, which is issued by this guy in New York who came back from Vietnam in the 70s and got very upset with the way his government was behaving, looked into it and realized there was nothing to stop him issuing world passports. It is registered with the UN, I believe. It's recognized by some 150 countries worldwide. It's not an official world passport in the sense that it hasn't been signed off on by all the world authorities, but I do have a world passport.
But can you use it?
You can. I have used it to cross into Europe, but that's mainly because they don't want to see your passport anyway.
So you don't have another passport?
No. Distressed. One thing we haven't talked about is the second referendum, or the possibility of a second referendum, which is obviously causing a lot of controversy right now. When Theresa May describes it as a betrayal of democracy to even think of holding a second referendum, I find that in itself to be a betrayal of democracy, because we are in a situation after 2.5 years where everything is now out in the open. The cards are on the table. We've had the survey done, if you like. We put a bid in on the house, we've got the survey, and the survey doesn't look too good. So are we going to buy it? Are we not going to buy it? It's reasonable to ask. And if people haven't changed their mind, which is what they all say, then what's your problem? That's fine. If we do now have a second referendum and it goes through, leave again, I will then say, fine, we deserve everything that's coming to us. That's it. I give up. But if some of us have changed our mind, and particularly if younger people are more now concerned about it than they were, then they should have a chance to say so. That strikes me as being the function of democracy. As somebody once said, when the circumstances change, you have the right to change your mind. The idea that we should just lock it off now because 2.5 years ago, a bunch of people were pissed off with the government and just decided, fuck them, I'm going to vote Brexit, which many have admitted that it was just a whim, then that is not the basis for making a sound decision that's going to affect the rest of my life, certainly, probably my children and even my grandchildren's life. We need to ask again. As I just said, if nobody's changed their mind, what's the problem? If they have, then that might be another issue that people will say, oh, we need to have another referendum. We'll deal with that when we get to it. Thank you very much. Let's just have a calm, collected, one more sensible, grown-up choice. Are we really going to do this? I think that's the least that the circumstances demand.